The great ancient theologian and philosopher Aesop tells the story about a rooster who one night was ready to settle down and roosted up in a tree. The rooster flapped its wings 3 times and gave a cock-a-doodle-doo, and just as it was to tuck its head under its wing for a good night's sleep, it saw a flash of red and a black pointy nose underneath the tree. And the rooster knew what that meant. Master Fox from down on the ground said, "My good friend, have you heard the wonderful news?" And the rooster replied, "What news is that?" And the fox said, "There's been a great truce, and all animals are now friendly. We're friendly with each other. Why don't you come down and celebrate with me the fact that we're now brothers and sisters?" The rooster thought about that for a while and then looked out into the horizon. And the fox was curious and said, "Rooster, what do you see?" And the rooster said, "I see 2 dogs coming this way." And in a flash, the fox ran off, at which the rooster said, "But fox, wait! I thought you said there was a truce between all animals." The fox called back, "Maybe the dogs haven't gotten the good news yet." And what's more, I have something very important to attend to. So Aesop says, "Beware if you're the trickster that you may be tricked." Well, in this gospel story, which I have to confess to you in my 30-some years of being in ministry, I don't believe I've ever preached a sermon on this gospel passage before, believe that or not, because of course it is full of very interesting characters, particularly the fox and the hen. And of course, as the story begins, some Pharisees who clearly were being rather foxy and deceitful because they said they had come to warn Jesus in what we might term today a false flag operation. They said to Jesus, "You better get out of here," as he was making his way to Jerusalem, because Herod has it in for you. Now that was a genuine threat. I'm sure we don't have to think too far or turn on the news for too long to see who's abusing their power, acting deceitfully, acting violently and cunning and treachery in our world today. Well, in that world, in that day, you remember that Herod was the one who first got the news from the wise guys from the east that we refer to as the Magi, who had said, "We're following the star of the one born to be King of the Jews." Of course, Herod thought of himself as the King of the Jews, and you probably recall that after the Magi visited Mary and Joseph in Bethlehem, they were warned, and they told Joseph, "You need to flee from here to become what? A refugee, right? To become a refugee fleeing the violence that was about to come in Bethlehem." They fled to Egypt, and sure enough, Herod, that cunning fox, sent the troops in to kill all the innocents. A real parallel with our current experience today, isn't it? That Herod, the treacherous, power-grabbing leader, had all of the innocents killed to forward their political aims. And so when the Pharisees, who Jesus also referred to as whitewashed tombs, right? When the Pharisees warned Jesus, he quickly retorted back to them, "Tell that fox Herod that I am going where I'm called to go to fulfill my ministry." Now, Herod had just before that, he had imprisoned and then beheaded Jesus' cousin, John the Baptist. And yet here Jesus was saying, "I'm not going to go a different direction or head back home again because of a threat from Herod. I'm going to complete the mission that God has ordained me to do." And then he continues on to talk about Jerusalem. For in the Gospels, this is the point in which Jesus is turning his face toward Jerusalem. And that's one of the reasons why during the season of Lent, as we think about our preparation for Jesus' historic journey into Jerusalem and Palm Sunday, and then eventually the Passion, the betrayal and trial and crucifixion. So in the Gospels, this is a point where Jesus is turning his face to Jerusalem. And Jesus weeps and mourns over Jerusalem like a parent, like a father or a mother weeping for their child that's lost and gone astray, that is facing all kinds of danger and threats, and yet they've turned away from the extended wing of the parent. And so Jesus says to the people of Jerusalem, which would really be all of God's people, he says, "Oh, that I might take you like a mother hen under my wings and protect you." This passage has very particular relevance for me and for my family. I began the service talking about the Brazilian family and my Brazilian mother, who curiously was not named Maria, as you might think, but she was named Mary, the same name as my mother. My biological mother was also named Mary, interestingly enough. And when my mother, who was the youngest of four, grew up in her household in times of drought and depression and the Dust Bowl of West Texas, they suffered a great deal. Growing up, her father left home at some point and some point came back again. Her parents were married and divorced a couple of times. Her father clearly was a violent alcoholic. And my mother, as a young girl, experienced that. The worst of those incidents happened when my mother was about 10 years old, and she was there in the house witnessing when my grandfather was brutally beating my grandmother. The oldest brother in the family stepped in to try to stop it. My grandfather broke my uncle's nose, and at that point, the whole family kind of split apart at the seams. And never again did either my uncle or my grandfather come back and live in the same household as my grandmother, her mother, and her two sisters. Now, it happened just before this incident that her older sister had been taking some piano lessons. And while he was still living with them, the grandfather had acquired a used upright spinet piano, and they had it in their house at that point. They didn't attend church much, but occasionally they did go to Sunday school. And it was while they were at Sunday school that my mother heard this hymn, "Jesus, Lover of My Soul." It turns out to be one of the most beloved hymns of Charles Wesley, the brother of John Wesley. And it speaks of the intimacy of the relationship between a follower or a believer and Jesus and God. It turned out that for my mother, who had not had the opportunity to take piano lessons, this was a very, very simple tune. I believe it typically is in a major key. I don't believe there's any sharps or flats in it. And so beginning with one finger at a time, my mother began plinking out the melody, "Jesus, Lover of My Soul," "To Thy Bosom Fly," et cetera, "Save me, oh save me, shelter me," like the hen sheltering the chicks. And my mother could remember what that was like on the farm in West Texas growing up, with chickens outside in the farmyard. And when they would hear the screech of the hawk above, the mother hen would start clucking and all the baby chicks would come and gather under the wings of the mother hen. So this was a real living image that my mother kept with her. In fact, As she was preparing for her final days at age 101, she was still living with this promise that God is the one who gathers us under their wings, who protects us. Jesus, lover of my soul. So as we celebrate this day together, may we all have that experience of going from the place where we are like a motherless child to the place where we know that others are willing to take us under their wing and to incarnate, to be the body of Christ, to offer safety and protection to others, especially those who are most vulnerable in our midst. Thanks be to God.